you have millions of options of what you can do, but many of those options can get you killed or get you hurt. It's not just about having options, it's about finding the best option. Bitcoin has ultimately established itself as the best investment option. Bitcoin is going to go much higher from a value perspective. I believe it will ultimately be in the millions of dollars. Show me exactly how much gold is out there right now, please. Now, show me how much gold is under the ground right now. Please show me. You can't. It's going to be a way better asset for the banks to custody than real estate, to give loans against it. You're holding pure energy, pure economic power, as opposed to now having the right to a certain home if they don't pay their mortgage or something. Like, it's a no-brainer. Look at it like a living organism, and you realize it can't be killed. This is a very, very strong organism that is growing over time, getting stronger over time. It's growing in value over time. It just can't be stopped at this point.
You are actually my second UFC fight after Renato Moicano. He was recently on.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. It's so great to hear Renato be so passionate about Bitcoin and governmental policies and I guess politics in general, and the situation with monetary policy. It's awesome. It's great to see him so passionate about it and sharing that information, and to see him do well. He's doing great in his career, and I really like Renato. Yeah,
really cool. And you are a former UFC fighter, so you're no longer fighting.
Correct.
And I think he was also in law school before. Did you? And I heard you were also in law school before. Is that connection with law school?
Not necessarily in law school. I was pre-law. I was part of a pre-law program when I graduated from Boston College, and the idea was to go on to law school after I graduated. The plans changed. I ended up not doing that, but yeah.
Okay, so like you were on the road of getting into law school, and then you changed to fighting.
Exactly.
Basically.
Exactly. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I love it. So, just before we get into the Bitcoin stuff, why did you change into fighting? And was that already for you? Like, I want to pursue that passion, or was that something because you were so good in it and you kind of wanted to do it, and you already got money for that, or like, what was the process there?
Yeah. Good question. For me, I think I was I think I was more following a path that maybe my parents wanted for me, right? My father was a physician, and maybe he wanted a lawyer in the family or something. But, the idea was, okay, you go to Boston College, you graduate, you go on to law school, and get into that practice. And to me, I just wasn't as passionate about it. And I, even when I, wanted to go full time into martial arts, I had no idea at the time that I would actually be a professional fighter. My plan was just to kind of study martial arts and end up teaching it. So I didn't really have a plan of fighting. I didn't have this organized plan necessarily. I just knew that if I could get up every day and train martial arts, that I would be a happy guy. And it ended up, leading towards, fighting and opening up other schools and gave me a lot of other opportunities. So yeah, it was pretty interesting.
Oh, nice. So you opened also schools up, and you're not only doing the fighting, but also opening schools up for other people to train you martial arts.
Yes.
Really interesting. I love that. Now into Bitcoin, when did Bitcoin come around for you? Like, how did you get into Bitcoin and discover that?
Yeah. So I think it was around maybe 2014 or so, 2013 maybe. I do remember the price of Bitcoin. I don't remember the year necessarily, but I remember Bitcoin had gone down to like the $70 range in and around there. And a buddy of mine in Los Angeles was telling me about it, where I was living at the time. And he said, I really think you'd be interested in this technology. This thing, Bitcoin, just went down. You should buy some now that it's pretty cheap. And he explained it to me, some kind of rough explanation of what Bitcoin is. And I was like, okay, trying to wrap my head around it. And then I kind of left, I think we were having lunch at the time, and I kind of left the meeting or the lunch thinking, well, clearly the government is going to be able to shut this down. I didn't really know what it was so much, and kind of wrote it off. And it wasn't until much later that I really started looking into it. And of course, the price had gone up a lot more. So I think I first purchased Bitcoin in 2016. And then I really tell people that I was a true Bitcoiner in 2017 when I kind of went all in 2017, as opposed to kind of seeing all these different digital assets as like similar things or all like kind of do different things. And, when I realized, okay, well, Bitcoin's the more expensive thing for a reason. And as I was kind of understanding more about it, went all in on Bitcoin, and of course, still didn't understand it fully at that point. And I'm not sure I do even today as much. I'm always learning more and more every single day. And I try to educate myself as much as possible. And Bitcoin's been such a fascinating journey of, continual learning and evolution.
Absolutely. I think nobody fully understands Bitcoin, but there are people closer to the 100% than others.
Right, exactly. Right.
But yeah, like that's amazing. Like being all in Bitcoin. So like you dismissed the altcoins, rightfully so. But you probably still have other investments, or did you completely went all in Bitcoin?
So I would say the only other thing that I have is real estate. So owning a home and that's pretty much it. But everything else is Bitcoin. Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't count a home as an investment. I know it's considered an investment in traditional finance, but I wouldn't like that's an expense that you pay for to have a home for your family.
Sure.
I wouldn't even count that. It's really interesting. How do you look as from the being really passionate about martial arts, about fighting in the UFC? How did that influence the way you look at Bitcoin?
Yeah, gosh, I guess it's always constantly evolving, but, I tend to look at a lot of things in terms of defense. How do I protect myself? That's kind of how I got into martial arts. Was I wasn't the biggest guy. I wanted to learn how to defend myself. Getting into a fight was a scary thing for me initially. And it's only when you kind of realize the impact of what that has on you, violence or someone who decides to attack you, that you realize for many people that, oh, wow, I probably should know. I should probably try to learn how to defend myself. And I think the similar thing is with money or investments. When you start to see that, okay, well, there's a lot of vulnerabilities here with your money and with it being valued less over time, and with the certainty that it will be less with time, you start to think, well, how do I protect myself? And then you start to look into, okay, well, do I buy stocks and ETFs, or, do I buy a business, or, do I buy gold, or do I buy real estate? And you start looking at all the different real estate, and you start all the other investment options. You start to go, well, they're kind of like weapons in a way. What are the different weapons that I can utilize, and what are the most versatile, and what are the most effective ones? And this is kind of what you're considering when you're training for a fight. Is you're looking at all these weapons. You're looking at, of course, the principles and trying to understand why it works and how it's going to work. And you start to implement them into your game, and you kind of stress test them until they are a part of you, and then you can use them. And I think that when you compare all the different investments that are out there, not only is Bitcoin, proven to be the most successful investment as far as growth, but I think it's also something that is the least vulnerable to attack, or the least vulnerable many times to it being eliminated completely. And I think that's how I tried to structure an approach to a fight. Well, it's like you have millions of options of what you can do, but many of those options can get you killed or get you hurt. So, it's not just about having options. It's about finding the best options. And for me, Bitcoin has ultimately established itself as the best investment option.
It's kind of a financial weapon. You described it like you have different weapons, you have different instruments that you can use, and Bitcoin is clearly it's like bringing a knife to
A
bring a knife
gunfight
to a
or
fist
yeah,
fight. Yeah, like,
right, yeah, exactly, 100%, and also multi-layered, Robin. Like, and you think about it in terms of like geopolitical implications. For the regular pleb who's out there, like it is a solution that kind of has this multi-pronged effect, or it's kind of like a multi-pronged weapon, like a Swiss Army knife, for example, to use that analogy. So, whereas monetary policy in general, for most governments or people that are implementing this, it's a blunt instrument, and a lot of times when you make these decisions with monetary policy, you have these unfortunate second and third order effects that ends up affecting a lot of people in a negative way, and Bitcoin ends up becoming this kind of Swiss Army knife solution to a lot of different things on varying levels.
I love that. Yeah, that's really, really good. I heard you also talking on another podcast. I forgot which one. Comparing Bitcoin kind of to being an underdog as with your own story of like why to learn fighting because you were like the underdog and you wanted to defend yourself. Do you see Bitcoin still as the underdog? Like, is that like we're still very early and it's kind of fighting the big fiat systems?
No question. I definitely see it that way. I believe, of course, that Bitcoin is going to go much higher from a value perspective. I believe it will ultimately be in the millions of dollars. So it's sitting right now at around $98,000 that we're recording this. I think there's a lot more to go, and people are still kind of underestimating its impact as an investment, as a tool for freedom, as a tool to solve a lot of different things. Whether you're looking at maybe like the Triffin Dilemma or something like that. I think it's something that not as many people are considering. And I also think like the way that it has grown. A lot of people make that anti-fragile comparison, and I think that it's very appropriate because as you're coming up, let's say in the fight game, for example, you need to experience hardship in order to grow. I can't know what I'm vulnerable to until I actually experience it. So fighting involves a lot of falling on your face. It involves a lot of hardship. It involves a lot of failure, quote unquote, for you to grow. And similar to, let's say, lifting weights or doing exercise where you have this soreness period, that's what allows your muscles to grow. That's what allows your hearts to get stronger. That's what allows your mind to get stronger. And it happens at varying levels and in varying ways. And it expands slowly over time. That's what I think real growth is. I think anytime you get these explosive times of growth, a lot of times it goes up fast, but it can also go down really quickly as well. So I think this period since 2009 that Bitcoin was released, it was really important for Bitcoin to actually grow slowly. And I think it's very similar to, a lot of people have compared it to mycelium or plant life or the bamboo root that grows underground and it spreads itself out first, strengthening the roots. And then all of a sudden, before you know it, it spreads out everywhere. And for people that are trying to kill Bitcoin or get rid of it, once it starts sprouting, it's very hard to put it out because it has spread itself everywhere. So I think that slow growth is really become its strength. And again, all the hardships that it's encountered has only strengthened it. So it really is a fascinating thing that if you were to look at it like a living organism. And you realize it can't be killed. This is a very, very strong organism that is growing over time, getting stronger over time. It's growing in value over time. And and it just can't be stopped at this point.
I love the analogy with like hardship, where you get stronger with hardship, because I think a lot of the people that are now coming in, they can look back at a history where Bitcoin is constantly being attacked, being it from 2017 with the block size wars, being like 2021 where Elon Musk came in and like bought it, it went up, and then he said some like environment thing that could be considered an attack, and so many more instances where people try to attack it. I mean, China, since like forever, they are trying to mine, to ban the mining and everything like that. And it's just because of those attacks that we know how strong it is. If Bitcoin never has been attacked, we wouldn't know if it's actually that stable, because nobody ever tried to attack it. And the attacks make it actually that strong asset where we can point towards in the history, like it has been tried, like this has already been happening. That's fascinating.
100%. And it's similar to how I got into similar to how I got involved in the martial arts. When I saw this thing called Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I saw, this Brazilian guy named Royce Gracie, who was really thin, really a small guy, and was defeating all these guys in real fights. That's where I could say, okay, well, it has proved itself to be strong. It is not, martial arts prior to that was largely based on, theories. There were these, theoretical statements of, well, if you decided to punch me, I would just kick you here, and I would, just avoid here, or block and do this, or grab your wrist. But none of it was proven. It was all really theory that you trained in the dojo, but you didn't really know whether it would work or not. But when you have mixed martial arts fighting, you could see which techniques were effective and which weren't, and you could see the evolution of it. And Bitcoin has proved itself to be immune to so many different things. And if it was vulnerable to some things, it would only come back stronger, just like a living organism. Like when you get sick and your immune system is now stronger because of it, and now that thing that got you sick before is no longer an issue. So it really has been a fascinating journey for me in learning about Bitcoin and how similar it is to, I guess it's a protocol, of course, for money and preservation of money, but it's very similar to the fight game in a lot of ways.
Interesting. Maybe that's a stupid question, but I still will ask it. If Bitcoin would be martial arts style, what martial arts style would it be? Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? Or?
It's a great question, actually. So I've actually thought about this a lot, and I do think it is very similar to an elite grappler, like a truly world-class grappler. I think it is versatile against all other styles. It is extremely efficient. It is extremely strong. It only gets stronger over time. So it almost has this quality of that superhero Wolverine, where you can't kill it. It only gets stronger. And, similar, and even maybe to the Incredible Hulk as well. The more that you attack it, the bigger and angrier it gets, the stronger it gets. It is. I guess I would equate it a lot to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It's very sophisticated, even though it may not look like it is. It is rooted in extremely strong truth, these principles that spread itself across a lot of different ways. It is linked to physics, just like grappling. And that, a lot of people foolishly think in grappling that what you're chasing are, a collection of techniques. But in reality, what you're doing is you're chasing physics. You're chasing truth. You're chasing what is correct, leverage, understanding how to get underneath someone's center of mass, control of the fulcrum and lever, so these are scientific principles that are unchanging. And Bitcoin is very much, similar to that.
Yeah, it's like tied to physics and mathematics. It's really, you mentioned something that I didn't fully hear. I remember like Triffin Dilemma or something like that.
Oh, Triffin Dilemma.
What is that?
Yeah, so the Triffin Dilemma is basically, and again, I don't pretend to be an expert on monetary policy or global reserve currency, but from my understanding, The Triffin Dilemma is when you have the global reserve currency, like the United States, they have the dollar. It's the strongest currency out there. It leads to a lot of other issues, right? So let's say because your dollar is so strong, you now need to export a lot of the production. So basically, instead of having domestic production, you now need to send it off to, say, China, for example, which now everybody is sending, a lot of their industrial production to China. So now you are potentially sending off a lot of this production to rivals or potential rivals, and now strengthening their economies, right? So, so I think that, and those, of course, have other geopolitical issues and even domestic issues. So now let's say, okay, you could do it, you could produce goods cheaper in China. Well, now that means that a lot of the, let's say, a factory in the United States now needs to be shut down. So now all those people lost their jobs. And now you're creating a certain amount of financial depression. You're creating mental depression. So now there's a lack of mental health. And now because of that, you're leading to potential alcohol and drug abuse. And now that is all because you can do it cheaper in another country. And now you just strengthened another country's economy because of it. So the United States is kind of in that issue. And especially now that China has basically stopped buying U.S. treasuries, that has actually come to kind of bite us in the ass a little bit, where now they're no longer buying as many treasuries as they had. It was like over $1 trillion. Now it's like around 700 billion or something like that. I think the biggest owner of U.S. treasuries right now at the moment, I think, is Japan. But so we're in this issue, and of course we have kind of stable coins that are kind of picking up the slack, like Tether and things like that. But it's been kind of fascinating to see how it all has been playing out. So I think that Bitcoin kind of can serve as a little bit of a solution to that, or maybe a lot of bit of a solution to that, by putting your money into an asset that's going to grow over time. Of course, I would lean toward it being a much better solution for, people all over the world, the regular pleb. But it also can be a solution to a lot of the issues that governments are experiencing all over the world as well.
And we're seeing, I'm fascinated by that. We already see that happening with like nation states coming and playing with Bitcoin. That surprised me totally that we already have that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And this is where it really starts to get interesting. And I know a lot of people aren't so excited about that. But of course, Bitcoin is this open protocol that's open to everybody. And obviously I urge everybody to buy as much as you can, whatever is possible. Because I do think it's heading that route that, governments are going to have to start doing this. I mean, corporations are already doing this. When you're seeing a unit of account that is being depleted and being diluted over time, you need to find a solution for that sinking ship, and Bitcoin is becoming that savior for a lot of people.
Interesting. It's absolutely mind-boggling for me. How did you see the first time when you heard about Trump is all of a sudden talking about Bitcoin, and now like they're slowly coming towards like, okay, maybe we put it on a balance sheet. There's like there's this wealth fund that's going on, David Sachs and the other guy that I currently lost the name of, but like there's developments coming in. How did you look at that? Is that the start of the nation state game theory race that we're really seeing now?
Yeah, I think Howard Lutnick is the guy that you're talking about, the guy from, Secretary of the Treasury, I think. But it's fascinating to watch. I think that you realize, over time, especially where we're at with the deficit and maybe with, again, our inability to produce goods at this point, because it's all with our rival, China, really, for the most part. You realize, like, well, what are we going to do about this? This is a real issue that it is not easily solved. And it's especially an issue where no country trusts any other country, and everyone's looking for a certain, I talk about the fight game. Everyone's kind of looking for the ability to dominate certain markets and to dominate certain to get certain amounts of control globally. Whether it's I want to be in control of the oil market, I want to be the most powerful military force. Whether it's again like gas and oil, or having the most expensive real estate, or being a major industrial power like China. So everyone's trying to dominate these various markets, and Bitcoin is global, and there's no government that has decided to kind of go all in on it. And now I don't think they're going to control it the way that they think, just based on Bitcoin and how it works. But if you think that that is going to be the way that people are going to trade on a more fair level, then wouldn't you want to have as much of it as possible? And I think that, again, when you realize that a lot of this spending isn't necessarily going away, and I know that Trump is looking to cut, use Doge to cut a lot of programs here and there. And I think that's helpful, but it's not going to solve our deficit. $36 trillion in deficit plus is not going to just go away. And I think you need to find various solutions to that. And, I know Trump's talking about tariffs and things like that, whether that's actually to make money or whether that's an eventual plan to devalue the dollar and try to bring industry back into the United States. I don't know. Are they playing, three-dimensional chess here and saying they want to strengthen the dollar when in reality they actually want to just buy Bitcoin and have as much of that as possible? I don't know. It's hard to tell, hard to see like what exactly their game plan is. But I do think that they're attempting to make a lot of progress as of right now in, doing their best to trying to get some of that power back, bring industries back into the United States, cut a lot of useless spending, just strengthen the position of the United States globally without having to go to war, because I think that has proven to be a silly thing, not only because of the loss of lives, but, of course, which is horrible, but it's just been this losing game where we're just dumping money into this very violent process for the last, I guess, several decades now. And nobody wins in that scenario. So I think that this is where Bitcoin can kind of come into play, I think.
Yeah, it's like the probably the best play they can currently do is to strengthen the US dollar, and the strength from the US is buy as many Bitcoins as they possibly can.
Yeah. I mean, why not? Again, if you're looking for ways, they just created a sovereign wealth fund, and I think this is how they're going to start it and how they can kind of circumvent the idea of a Bitcoin strategic reserve. If that doesn't get passed for whatever reason, that maybe they have this sovereign wealth fund that they can create and kind of invest in maybe Bitcoin that way, or kind of have this dual pronged way of accumulating Bitcoin. You have your strategic Bitcoin reserve and you have your sovereign wealth fund. Maybe that's what they're thinking, but who knows? They're investigating it. They say they're doing their research now and trying to figure it out, whether they're delaying time and kind of, they'll start buying throughout that process in secret. I don't know, right? Because obviously if you announce that, then every country is going to try to have this race to buy as much Bitcoin as possible. The price is going to run up. Now everything's more expensive. Whereas if they're doing things in a more subtle way, perhaps they can buy Bitcoin at a lower price. So I don't know. Who knows what's going to happen? I don't pretend to know all the answers to that, but I think it is something that you need to approach very carefully, though.
Absolutely. Like, just think about if you are the number one guy advising Donald Trump on how to best buy Bitcoin. Like if he already had that decision of like, yeah, I want to buy Bitcoin with the United States, how do we approach that? The best approach would be to send out mixed signals, to make it not clear that it actually will happen, and to say we investigating it, we're doing it and prolonging the process of it as long as humanly possible, and since day one.
Yes.
It's not unlikely that this is what's happening. Obviously, we don't know. Like I definitely don't know. But it's not something. If that's a possibility, I would actually recommend if I would be the number one advisor to the president of the United States that wants to buy Bitcoin, that's exactly the way I would do it if it's a legal framework that is possible.
100%. It's like when I was training for a fight, I wasn't releasing a bunch of videos and telling everybody what I'm doing to prepare for it. And in some cases, I would give misinformation, right? I say, I'm just not training too much, or I'm just working on stuff. Just kind of talk very generally about it. But if I'm giving the enemy or my rivals ideas of what exactly I'm doing, it's like, why would I do that? Why would I give them my strategy? So again, we're speculating here. We're not sure exactly what they're doing, but I would imagine that's what's playing out.
Absolutely. You also mentioned the sovereign wealth fund. What is the difference if they do it with like strategic Bitcoin reserve versus buying it with the sovereign wealth fund? Like, do you know the difference of that?
I don't know exactly. My understanding of it is that, the Bitcoin strategic reserve is something that needs to be approved, that needs to be voted on by Congress to allow it. And the sovereign wealth fund is basically an executive order. So Donald Trump is initiating this order that's saying we need to kind of have this United States fund of investing in assets, similar to Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Norway. They have these investments, for the fund, basically the taxpayers' money that is going to be able to grow in value over time. So that's my understanding as far as the difference of it is an executive order can basically be executed like now. Whereas the other, the strategic Bitcoin reserve is something that needs to be voted on. And I don't know, I would assume that the strategic Bitcoin reserve would be a much bigger, purchase, right? Because maybe you have the federal backing behind it and you could probably buy a lot more, but I don't really know enough about it.
I partnered up with Coin Vigilante. This is the most beautiful Bitcoin timepiece that I ever saw created by anyone. Look at that beauty. I love it so much. Coin Vigilante made a perfect Bitcoin watch. That's the perfect, subtle, elegant way to go out there and show that you are a Bitcoiner. And that watch brand is Bitcoin only. And Coin Vigilante just dropped a completely new and amazing Genesis edition of their watch collections. You have the date of the first ever mined Bitcoin block in there, and of course also the block height and which epoch we are currently in. I love the level of detail they put in this masterpiece, and make sure to check out those amazing Coin Vigilante timepieces down in the descriptions. I love those watches so much. If you watch or listen to my podcast on a regular basis, I guess you already bought some Bitcoin. And now the most important step is to keep the Bitcoin. Keep them secure in a hardware wallet. My personal recommendation for hardware wallet is the BitBox. It's super secure. It's simple to set up. It's also a perfect gift for a friend who has still the Bitcoin on an exchange. And you can get a 5% discount with the code Robin at the checkout. Visit bitbox.swiss/Robin to get your BitBox. And the next step is to really level up your sovereignty as an individual. You have to have the most secure self-custody setup. You have to secure your own devices. You have to protect your privacy. You have to set up an inheritance plan. And depending on where you live, you even want to have a plan B, a citizenship where you can move in case something goes really wrong. And through all those steps, the Bitcoin way is guiding you through step by step. And if you visit thebitcoinway.com/partners/Robin, you even get a 30-minute free call to find out how you can level up your sovereignty. So even if for some reason in Congress it's not working out, he still has an option to buy Bitcoin anyways.
That's what I think. That's what I think.
Interesting. You mentioned also one thing that's I think really important to point out, and I think to talk about in this topic is some people disagree with United States buying Bitcoin, or even institutions. I even heard people like, oh, they don't like that Michael Saylor is buying so many Bitcoin, which brings me to the point of like, Bitcoin is for enemies. Bitcoin is for everyone. And there are a lot of people that say like, no, like we don't want those people into Bitcoin, which is the most anti-Bitcoin philosophy I ever heard. Like Bitcoin is a free open protocol. I just wanted to bring this in because I think it's really important that, it's permissionless and open. And with that, it's also permissionless and open to institutions, to governments, to everyone that wants to investigate or invest or participate in Bitcoin. I think there's a really important message to make.
Yeah, and it kind of goes against the Bitcoin philosophy in that. Like, I understand that Bitcoin probably wasn't. Well, we don't even know. You know, I think it was more made for, you know, the regular person, but perhaps also it was someone or a group of people understanding that there was not going to be an escape from monetary debasement, and that the one thing that could save it was the creation of this black hole called Bitcoin that could suck in that monetary energy and save it and preserve it. So again, you know, I think that so in some ways it goes against also kind of the Bitcoin ethos of like, you know, hey, there's this thing called proof of work, and there's this idea of, you know, no one's coming to save you. You're going to have to work for it. And the only way you can get Bitcoin is mining it or buying it. And it's free game, man. It's like it's open to anybody who's capable of doing that, and just accumulate as much as you can.
Absolutely. And the regular person had now 15 years time to accumulate as much as possible. And we are still early. Like if you look at the full potential of Bitcoin versus where we are right now, you probably still have a good 2, 3, 4, maybe in 5 years to accumulate Bitcoin really cheaply versus towards what Bitcoin will be worth in 10, 20, 50 years from now. So there's no like, oh, like now it's so expensive. No, it's not. 100K is nothing.
100%. And well, and I think that, like, you know, nature is not fair. There are predators and there are prey, and you have to position yourself the best that you can to be able to win whatever game that you're playing. And I think that's kind of what it comes down to.
And it's good that nature is not fair. I like that. It's what made us strong as human beings. It's like the martial arts of life is coming at you, and we as human beings, at least till now, kind of ruled the world to a certain extent. I'm fairly certain there's more advanced models out there that are human beings or maybe life forms. But it's good that life throws things at you and you have to combat that. This is where you get the strength of it. It's boring if everything is going the right way. It makes if I start something new and everything is going good from the get-go and there's no problems coming up, it makes me very conscious about it.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's really well said. I think it's a part of the machine. Like, the machine doesn't work if there's no, like, you know, it's almost like the yin and yang, you know. It's like I need this to happen for me to grow, and these don't happen without each other, and I think that's what allowing, you know, the smart and the strong to survive and get smarter and stronger. Like, you need that opposing force. So
absolutely interesting. One thing with the strategic Bitcoin reserve, I'm wondering a lot is if now it looks like Donald Trump and the president, like they're actually now going ahead and doing the strategic Bitcoin reserve in some way or shape or form. Like, I think there will there will something come along those lines in 2025. If that actually happens and they are getting more and more in that direction, what happens to the future of the US and the US dollar when they integrate Bitcoin with that? What do you think will that future look like?
It's hard to say because, I think that there's there's this idea that, we want to preserve, and preserve the fact that we have the global reserve currency. But that is a competing thought to what Bitcoin is, because, money is a winner take all scenario, right? That's something that is said over and over, and it's absolutely true. Everything is going to converge to what the best money is. And clearly Bitcoin has proven itself to grow the fastest and best over time. Whereas, all currencies, all fiat currencies are debasing over time. And I just don't see that changing. So I don't know. Even stable coins, I think, are a solution up to a certain point, because, like when Tether reaches, I don't know, into like $1 trillion or $1 trillion of like having US treasuries, like, I don't know, like they're going to have a problem on their hands as well now too, because now they're holding something that is, obviously debasing over time. So I don't know. I think the only kind of solution to that is putting your money into Bitcoin, right? So I don't know, man. And that's why there's certain people out there that are saying that, like Bitcoin isn't going to the millions, it's going into the billions. Like, and I could definitely see that, a lot further down the line. It could definitely go that way. So I don't know exactly what is going to happen in that regard, but I think the best case scenario is that it does happen slowly over time. So there's not this like huge disparity of wealth and, chaos. So I don't know. It's hard to predict exactly how it's going to go down, but like we were talking about earlier, if that's the case, and if you kind of know that to be true, then I think everybody is realizing now. Like in the United States, it seems like more corporations, and now every state is trying to create this Bitcoin strategic reserve. Why? Because they know it's going up, and they also know the end game potentially for the U.S. dollar. So. Where are you going to store your value? What is the best case scenario? Where is the most likely? What is the most likely scenario? I think people are understanding that, you want to accumulate as much Bitcoin as possible.
I have this podcast now for almost 400 episodes, and every day I'm like, I have to buy more Bitcoin, but I'm like, I'm already all in. How can I do that?
I know.
You get a lot of formal, like I'm because I do a daily podcast, I'm really skewed towards like, oh, that's bullish for Bitcoin, that's bullish for Bitcoin, that's bullish for Bitcoin. I'm trying to calm myself down sometimes. I'm like, okay, maybe it's not all happening tomorrow. It's okay if if things are taking time, because I'm in this bubble of talking to so many Bitcoiners every year, like 365 Bitcoiners every year. That's a massive amount, and you kind of get into like a Bitcoiner's mindset.
100%, Robin. And then, the other thing is the SAB 121, with what's happening with banks now having the ability to custody Bitcoin. Now, am I going to give my Bitcoin to a bank? Probably not, but this is an option. And now that you have these larger institutions that are going to be allowed to custody Bitcoin and you can make loans against it, I think this is another game changer. I mean, you look at, real estate is what it is because of this. Like, and now if you compare Bitcoin to real estate, and if you're a bank and you're going, all right, there's all these vulnerabilities with real estate. We just saw it in Los Angeles, where some of the most expensive homes in the country were burned down to the ground. And, you look at that from a vulnerability standpoint, you look at that from an insurance standpoint. And then you look at this asset called Bitcoin, which can't be burned down. It can't be hacked. It can't be taken. You don't have to pay maintenance fees on it. You don't have to pay utilities on it. And it's literal pure value. Like it's going to be a way better asset for the banks, to custody than real estate, to give loans against it. It's like if you're holding pure energy, pure economic power, as opposed to, now having the right to a certain home if they don't pay their mortgage or something. Like it's a no-brainer. Bitcoin's going to take off like crazy. Now, how responsible the banks are going to be moving forward, I don't know. Hopefully there's some kind of protective rights for people and who own Bitcoin in that regard. But like, I don't know, man, like that's another one where I could see this being another huge tailwind for Bitcoin as well, as far as the price.
The great thing with Bitcoin is like, a lot of people say like, oh, like then we will develop the same thing with gold. No, like Bitcoin is digital. So we have the possibilities of actually verifying where the Bitcoin is. Like if you have, immediately. If you have, for example, like 2 Bitcoin and Bitcoin is like at 1 million and you have like those $2 million and you want to have like a loan out of like, I don't know, $200,000 at one point, you will be able to have multi-signature setup, whether it's an escrow or a DLC or whatever, with a bank where you have part control of your Bitcoin. You see exactly where it's sitting, and they cannot do anything with it.
Yeah.
This is a total game changer. Like this never happened before, and this will completely change the banking system.
100%. It's like, show me how much gold is out there with precision. Show me exactly how much gold is out there right now, please. Now, show me how much gold is under the ground right now, please. Show me. You can't. Like, you cannot. Bitcoin, you can see it all. You know it with certainty. And that's where the game changes. And not only do you know it with certainty, but it's predictable. You know there will only be 21 million Bitcoin, right? So with gold, there's a lot of uncertainty, and again, cost associated with it. It's like, okay, where are you going to send that gold? How much is that going to cost? Now, not only do you have to ship it and send it, but you need to assay the gold, and like you said, prove that it is actual gold, and that's a whole chemical process that you need to undergo. And it's Bitcoin is such a game changer in that regard, and I think it's good. It already is changing the game, but I think again we are just getting started.
Interesting. Do you feel like the verifying aspect is the most important value of Bitcoin? I mean, there are so many important values in there, but like, what would you say is like the number one that makes Bitcoin so valuable?
Gosh, like we said, it is such a multi-pronged tool that does so much. But I guess the fact that you can preserve your savings over time, that for people who are keeping their head above water in these very difficult economic times where inflation is taking a hold and everything is more expensive and your money doesn't buy what it used to, or if you're worried about having money when you retire to survive, or if you're looking for a way to preserve that, to pass that on to your children. I mean, there was a time where having $1 million was a big deal, where it's like, oh man, like you have $1 million. Wow. For someone who's retiring in their 60s or 70s, or 80, that's going to be a difficult thing to retire off $1 million now, especially not even knowing how much things are going to cost in the future. So I guess, the preservation of your savings, I think it's most powerful just for the regular person. But I don't know. Of course, there's so many different aspects to it, but its defensive properties, is huge. And of course, in association with its inability to be, for the network to be hacked, I think is huge, obviously, as well.
Absolutely. And it's fun to think about the different perspective of you can't even retire now on $1 million. I mean, if you invest $1 million, you probably are capable of doing that, but like just looking at it from a US dollar perspective, at some point you will be able to retire on one Bitcoin. Like one Bitcoin will be such a huge amount where like easily can retire on that. You probably can retire a whole family on that. That's massive.
Yeah, for sure.
Really interesting. One thing that I also want to get into with you, I think it could be really fun because of the fighting and the sports background. How valuable or like how influential is that proof of work philosophy for you in Bitcoin, but also for you in the world, in your life?
Yeah. So, I guess it depends on what angle you're looking at it from, but I think the idea that Bitcoin is this truth machine is really interesting. Where it's not, this isn't theory, right? It's like you either beat that guy or you don't, and we're either going to see if you put the work into a training camp in preparation for that fight or you didn't. For the most part, over time, we'll certainly see that. I can only get away with not training hard. Maybe one fight, maybe two fights. I got lucky. I landed a lucky punch and I did it. But if we were to take my results over time, and if I wasn't putting the right amount of work into it, that you would see that I would be losing way more fights than winning more fights. And, that's why it's so crazy that people still doubt Bitcoin. It's like, this is the best performing asset for a long time now. Governments have tried to shut it down. People have tried to shut it down. People have been trying to control this thing. And the truth will always come out. The light will always defeat the dark. And I think that's what is so cool. And it's the same thing with fighting. It's like, it may take you a little bit longer, certain people longer than others, but we're going to find out if you've been putting in the work or not. Why? Because we're going to see the results. This isn't going to be, even a debate of words that's open to interpretation. You either win or you lose in fighting. That's it for the most part. Of course, there's certain controversies, but if I get a finish, let's say with a submission hold, or I knock you out, there is no discussion who won that fight. It's you can't debate it. So in that regard, it's very similar, with Bitcoin and what it's been doing. And I think that, there is this beautiful truth about it because of it.
I like games where there are clear rules.
Right.
That's why I sometimes have problems with soccer, football, however you want to call it, because there's so much debate going on with the rules. And if you look actually at the rules, for example, if a ball goes to the hand, you can interpret it in many different ways.
Right.
You can
Did he move his hand? Yeah.
Is it an active move or is it like you can argue a lot on that.
Yes.
And I mean, that's also probably why football is so famous, because like you can argue and you can then talk about it and stuff like that. But I like games where there are very clear rules and everyone has to follow them, and there's not even a chance of cheating. That's why I like Bitcoin so much, because like there's very clear rules, and if you just know there's so many Bitcoin in that wallet, and you cannot cheat on that, and you cannot make more of it. I like that aspect a lot.
Yeah, no, I think that's beautifully said. 100% agree with you. And not only that, the fact that it's also so simple, again, to get something very simple, I think it involves a lot of complexity, right? The philosophy behind Bitcoin, the technical aspects of Bitcoin, thinking about all the things that, how you're going to design this code to develop Bitcoin is very complex, but in the execution of it, it's very simple with very simple rules, where there is no interpretation. It's just, it is what it is. It is or it isn't. And I think that's what makes simplicity so beautiful. And Bitcoin is absolutely that.
That's beautifully said. Yeah, really cool. How much, by the way, is in fighting strength versus skill? Like, is like if someone has almost no strength, is it even possible to do it with skill?
Yeah. So that's a really good, kind of debate point that a lot of people talk about because, physical gifts are a great thing to have, to be blessed with tremendous strength or speed or size, can be a huge advantage. However, when you're in a sport where other people have those same things, technique will be king. So if the physical qualities are equal, technique will be king. What's interesting about that, if the physical qualities are very advanced, but technique is king, right? You have one person who's highly technical and the other person just has physical skills, but not a whole lot of technique. Technique will win out. So as you lessen the technique, the physical qualities will start to even itself out, right? And when the physical qualities are relatively even, the person who has higher technique will usually win out. Not all the time. So that's why it is certainly important to have both things as much as possible. You have to come in shape. You want to be as strong as possible. You want to be as flexible as possible. All those things are no doubt important. But to me, the know-how of fighting is vastly more important and way more interesting to me. And maybe that's because I wasn't blessed with a ton of physical gifts, but to me, the technical aspect of fighting is what really got me to fall in love with it, because it got me to understand that, yes, a smaller person can defeat a larger person if they really know what they're doing on a technical level.
I love that. I relate to that a lot. I'm not a fighter, I'm a swimmer. And in swimming, it's so clear that if you are long, if you're large, like me, I'm almost 2 meters long. Like I have huge hands also. Like I have a lot of advantages in swimming.
Yes.
But if you don't know how to swim like that doesn't bring you anywhere. And
Absolutely.
In swimming, you really notice the techniques. And then if you have similar techniques, obviously, if you are a similar technique level and you are just larger, like you are just like have more body length, you will win out over the other one.
100%. And you'll see people cater their style of fighting to their physical qualities that they have. For example, in your case, I would be like, Robin, you really wanted to, develop a very educated jab to keep people on the outside so they can never touch you, right? It's similar to that. And also it varies by the sport. Your physical ability allows you to be a great swimmer. Now, swimming, having swam before and talk to some high level swimmers, technique is definitely involved. You want to be efficient, right? So you could perform better. There's less drag in the water. All that stuff is super important. So in a sport, let's say like swimming or sprinting, physical ability is king, right? More than anything else, because it doesn't matter how much I work on my technique. I'll never be a better swimmer than you. It's just not going to happen. I'll never be faster than Usain Bolt in a 100-meter race. It's just not, no matter how much I work on it, But if, let's say all of us maybe play golf. The person with the best technique is going to be the best golfer. The physical abilities, okay, they matter, I guess, a little bit, sure. But technique is more important to that game in golf, I would argue, than say something like swimming or sprinting. Like physical abilities are probably more important, if that makes sense. MMA, it's maybe 60-40, something like that. I don't know.
Hey, that's an interesting. I never looked at sports of like a spectrum between skill and strength. Where in swimming, strength is really important.
Yeah.
There is interesting. Like I sometimes see in the pool very muscular guys that fight with the water and have obviously no technique. It looks really funny, and I applaud them because they try to swim but they are they are. Like I have good technique, so I can swim for like 2, 3, 4 hours, and it's like walking to me.
Yes.
And it's probably like 3 times faster than like a muscular guy trying to fight his life. So like you need the base technique, but you're right. Like if someone has the same level of technique, the body size, the strength, this just completely outweighs everything.
Totally.
And then on golf, it's interesting because you can be really unfit and even like fat or like very thin or like almost no muscles. If you know how to hit the ball, you probably are really good in goals. Like you need
Exactly.
some strength. You need to,
Yeah, sure.
you have to move that small of a ball. Like that strength you have to have, but most people have that, I think. And then it's just about the technique. So yeah, that's a really interesting. I never thought about that actually. There's
Yeah.
a scale of that.
Yeah, no, for sure. And that's where like efficiency comes into play, whether you're talking about Bitcoin or something else, is that, the value of having superior technique is that it's easily repeatable, right? It's like, for every pool lap that I'm doing, maybe I'm keeping up with you for the first 5 laps, but over time, my frame and my technique is such that like Robin now is just like on the 6th lap, that's where you just really kind of perform. And now I'm just left in the dust, right? So, yeah, it's a fascinating thing. That's what intrigues me so much about like the technical aspects of fighting is the efficiency aspect of like, how do I hone in my technique to be so good that I'm using less energy than you? Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, I also liked swimming always. In when I was like now I don't do competition. Now I swim 3 times a week. But coming back to that clear rules in. I don't know. There are probably other sports that are also like very close to that level, but in swimming, there's almost no debates.
Yeah, right.
Like you have a starting signal, and you know exactly like did you move before the starting signal? Then you're disqualified. If you haven't
Yes.
moved before, then you're okay. Then there's like, you can only be a certain amount underwater. There's a clear rule where you have to get over water.
Right.
And like, there are very clear rules. You can, see them very nicely. And then it's just like, who was faster? Yeah.
That's
That's
it.
stopwatches, and they are like extremely accurate, and there's no debate going on. Where else there's other sports, and I don't. There might be some sports that are less debatable even like than swimming, and maybe that's why swimming is not that popular, because you cannot debate a lot. Like, he was faster. The
Yeah, no,
debate is
for
over.
sure. For sure. And in fighting, you will get that debate because the rules sometimes are open to interpretation. So if it went the full distance of a bout, now it's these judges that are standing in different aspects of the cage that are making judgments on who won the fight. And they may not have seen all the punches, or they may be seeing it differently, or may not have certain amount of experience in certain areas. And that's the cool thing about, racing type events, where it's like there's very little debate. It's right there. We have the technology to see who got there first, and that's it. Yeah.
And there's one more small aspect. Sorry about going on swimming so much,
Yeah.
but there's one more aspect on swimming that is very unique. You cannot communicate to the other competitors like with like boxing or like martial arts. You see him, like you can make some faces and stuff like that. With football, there's a lot of communication going on. But in swimming, you could look at the other one, but this, like, then you lost the race when you look at the other one. And even if you try to speak something, nobody will understand what you spoke because you're underwater. And it's a really unique aspect of swimming.
That
where
is true.
you just swim for yourself basically, and you
That
don't
is
even know
true.
what's going on.
That is true.
Yeah, really cool. One last question before we come to the end routine. With all the things that we now talked about and how bullish we are on Bitcoin, how do you think, what is the major thing that Bitcoin will change in this world?
Gosh.
If something at all, like maybe it doesn't change. Maybe you think that nothing changes with Bitcoin.
I think a lot of things are going to change. A lot of things that I probably don't see as well. But I think in a lot of ways it's going to get rid of the idea of wasteful spending. That's intriguing to me. And if you ask me an hour later or tomorrow, I may have a different answer. But I think that when you realize that you have the best asset possible, and you have the best protocol for preserving your money, that you need a great excuse to spend it, right? It's like why Bitcoiners are so adamant about not selling their Bitcoin. It's like you have to give a very, very strong argument for you wanting to sell it. So either you have a lot of it, or you need something really badly. And that's what money really should be, right? Is, and that's what's interesting. And I think you can make that same, I guess, argument for, let's say, government spending in a lot of ways. Like, I think there's a ton of wasteful spending and a lot of unnecessary spending. And I think oftentimes people need to be reminded that that money is actually your money. It's your tax paying money that's funding those programs or funding those wars or funding whatever it is. And I think that, Jack Mahler's said it best, like, why would I use something that someone else can print for free? So I think it changes people's fundamental understanding about money and value and savings, and not only individuals but corporations, governments. So I think it makes everything more efficient as a result, and it really kind of flips it on its head. I think, and I just think also it's just oftentimes a very unfair system that involves so much cronyism and in so many different ways. So I think it brings back a lot more fairness. It brings rules to the table, and there's nothing anybody can do to change it. So I think it's, and I think it's going to make it a more peaceful world, a more truthful world. So I think the effects of that are extremely positive and wide-reaching.
And it's interesting how, like, I experienced that now really hard, where most of my income is actually in Bitcoin, and I do everything in my power currently. And I'm rethinking that a little bit. Do not spend Bitcoin. Right. And I haven't spent any of my Bitcoin. And I'm in a special situation because of some old Austrian law. Actually, most of my Bitcoin stack is tax free.
Oh, wow.
I wouldn't even sell, I wouldn't even have to pay capital gains tax if I spend my Bitcoin. Like, most of my stack is actually tax free, which is fascinating. And even though there's no tax hurdle, there's no technical hurdle, I don't want to spend my Bitcoin. Like, I'm like trying to overdraft my bank account and trying to, like, okay, where can I get like fiat income and stuff? I don't want to spend my Bitcoin. I will have to this year. Like, there's no question. Like, if most of your income is coming in Bitcoin, you're already all in Bitcoin. Like, sure, you have to pay for your life somehow. But it's super interesting how I just don't like. I'm even looking at like borrowing against it, and I don't know. I don't really want to do it because of peace of mind. Peace of mind is something that I'm really liking, and I don't think the rates are fair. Like the Firefishes, all the Nexo and Lenton and stuff like that.
Quite high.
Like 10-12%.
But things are going to change soon, Robin, where that can be an option, where you'll get more agreeable rates to what people are getting for homes and mortgages and things like that. So I think that's an interesting thing where you can, assuming they have a nice protocol maybe where things are in multi-sig, and, you can start to, borrow against it, and you can keep it similar to how people do with real estate. So interesting times.
I think under 7% in a multi-signature setup, I would do it. I think like that's a rate and terms that I don't want to send my Bitcoin to some exchange and get like 50% loan to value like that. And that's not something that I'm looking forward to do. So it has to be some escrow or DLC or something like that. And I'm not willing to pay more than 7%. Like around 7%, it makes sense for me, even though it's crazy, because we all know, like, no matter if it's 7% or 12%, Bitcoin will outdo that if you do it like 5-10 years. One thing also, most of the platforms are like more short-term, like Firefish, for example, only has 18 months as a duration. If I do that, I want to do it 5 years, like 10 years, like a house, like borrowing, like that. Right. Like, but we will. I agree. We will have a lot of innovations coming into in this space. Will be really fun to see the next coming years.
Yeah.
Absolutely. One question that I asked each and every one of my guests is, what can we learn from you besides Bitcoin?
Let's see. I talked about, I guess, a little bit about my fighting career. I like teaching a lot. I really enjoy teaching martial arts a lot. I also I'm into pistols and pistol shooting and competing in pistols, where you kind of run around and hit targets and things like that. That's been another kind of technical thing that I've been into, and I'm starting to teach that as well. And that's pretty much it. I love kind of that warrior mindset and the improvement of I guess technique. That's something I've always been not even passionate about, but I probably get obsessed about it, where I'm thinking about it all day. But yeah.
Really interesting. We have an end routine in the podcast where the previous guest is asking a question for the next guest without knowing who the next guest actually is. And the question from the previous guest to you is, if you were to imagine money better than Bitcoin, what feature would it have?
Oh my gosh. Interesting. Anytime I try to think about, the vulnerabilities of Bitcoin, it's hard to come up with something. If I were to come up with a money that would be better than Bitcoin, what would it be? I guess maybe I guess as of right now, maybe, and it's getting easier, maybe an easier way of securing it and using it. That maybe involves less steps, maybe like some kind of easier way of using it in that regard. But it's pretty easy, but maybe that would be the only thing, because, there's a certain amount of responsibility needed for it. Of course, you can't just, right. But I don't know.
It's super interesting, that question, because I also never thought about that question before he approached it. But when he was giving it to me, I was thinking about it, like, I don't know if there's any, like, all the things come with trade-offs. For example, one thing that is bad is not everyone will have access to the main layer, because at some point you will be priced out. But that's why it's secure. Like, that's why it's decentralized. Like, we cannot open up the space for everyone. Like, there's always trade-offs to the things. And maybe one feature that we need in the future, and we probably can program that in, but we need longer times to sync between planets at one point.
Right. No, it's true. And it's the same with fighting, where I tell people all the time, it's like, you can't have all the things. What you need, you want the best options, but all you're really doing is, like, you can add layers for protection in some ways, but it doesn't make it, impenetrable in certain ways if you're looking at it security from, physical security standpoint or whatever. So yeah, you can't always have all the things. You just want to look for the best options. And so, yeah, that's interesting.
Really cool. Thank you so much, Kenny, for being on the show. Before I let you go, where can people find you, ask you questions, and reach out to you?
Yeah, so you can hit me up on social media. At Kenny Florian. I'm on Twitter. I'm also on Nostr as well. I'm on Instagram as well. And let's see. That's pretty much it. Anyone have any questions or want to learn more about me, you can check out kennyflorian.com as well.
Thank you so much, Kenny, for being on. Also, thank you so much for everyone that is watching and listening, for joining us today. As always, I'll be back tomorrow with another episode. Bye-bye.